It's great to be with you tonight, and I'm really happy to have you here because your visits tomorrow during Lobby Day are incredibly important. I just want to take a moment to recognize your president, Darlene Espinoza, for her amazing leadership and the great work that she does on behalf of your organization. And I want to thank Ted for an introduction. Ted and I have known each other for, I guess, 18 years now, Ted? 18 years when we were both in different roles, but really looking to achieve the same stuff that we're working on now. And Ted and Frank Ruffino do an amazing job in representing your interests here in Sacramento and make sure that they're articulating the messages that you need to be heard here in the Capitol. And I want to thank you all for your endorsement of my campaign, for your work every day for the people of our state, and for giving voice to your membership. California is clearly on the road to recovery. Our job market is expanding faster than every other state. Our revenues are coming in faster than all but one other state. And our recovery is happening faster than 44 other states. This has really been a phenomenal turnaround over the last couple of years. We've gone from a decade of multi-billion-dollar deficits to years of multi-billion-dollar reserves, and that doesn't fully explain the turnaround. When I got elected to the Assembly in 2008, November of 2008, was sworn in December 1st, was called back to the Capitol 10 days later to work on a budget where we had a $60 billion deficit out of a $110 billion budget. Those were massive levels of deficits. They were structural deficits. And together we figured out a way to move from that to a point where we had a $2 billion reserve last year. We'll have one again this year. And we'll have respectable reserves that will sustain us in the coming years. And this really gets to why I'm running for controller as well. I think we need a controller who will fight hard to protect the gains that we've made and continue the commitment to fiscal responsibility of government, but also in looking at it holistically, not just looking at simple, overly simplified dollars and cents equations, but really balancing things with a lens towards the impact on people. We can't repeat the mistakes of the past where we use temporary spikes in revenues to create ongoing obligations, whether it was programmatic obligations, or quite frankly, whether it was approving permanent tax cuts for certain folks that we really couldn't afford over the long run. If we do that, if we go back to those bad patterns, we'll be back in the same situation we faced when I first took office. A situation that required us to make massive cuts, and instead of being able to close tax loopholes for the people who were taking advantage of them, it forced us to put situations forward where we had some tax increases for middle-class folks who weren't the ones that were causing the problems in the first place. So now as we move forward, our first priority has to be to govern in a way that is as effective, as efficient, and as fiscally responsible as is possible. And it's something that you and your fellow supervisors understand probably better than anybody else, because you understand what it means to get true efficiency, not things that pass for efficiency. When you look back to the discussions that Ted made reference to, during the worst part of the recession, Governor Schwarzenegger's idea was to make changes that sounded good on paper to some people, like furloughs, that didn't save the state any money, but caused a lot of hardship and decreased access for service for people throughout the state. Cuts like moving people off of in-home supportive services, which saved us money in the budget year, but cost us $7 for every dollar we saved, because moving people from in-home services to institutionalized care wasn't as good a quality, wasn't as good a quality of life, but really did cost us more money. Those kinds of decisions place an enormous burden on the folks who keep our roads safe, the folks who staff our hospitals and ensure that the air we breathe is clean and the water we drink is safe, the folks that you represent and the folks that you supervise. we can't allow California to fall back into that same pattern. So my colleagues and I have worked hard to restore the integrity of California's finances, and we're seeing very clear results. Our budget reserves are strong, and they're becoming stronger and stronger each day. And that is why we have some of the flexibility that we needed to be able to respond to things like the drought. So 2 weeks ago, you saw us come out with a large package of relief for people that are disproportionately impacted by the drought. And let's be clear, there are people up and down the state that are in crisis because of the drought, but in particular folks in the Central Valley of the state. And it would have been a huge negative drain on the economy if we didn't have an immediate response. But the fact that we've been responsible and built these reasonable reserves gave us the flexibility to go in and make the actions that we needed to. But also, as you heard Ted say, we have now passed 3 on-time balanced budgets in a row. It's good. This is the first time in 30 years that 3 on-time balanced budgets have been passed in a row. This year will be the 4th, which will be the first time since 1970 that we'll have 4 on-time balanced budgets in a row. Now, why is that important? Clearly, it's important for folks who don't want to have to get a voucher instead of a paycheck. I think that's kind of a good thing. It's good for folks that do business with the state and want to get paid and make payroll. But it's good for the state. By passing 3 on-time balanced budgets in a row, we had the creditworthiness of the state increase twice. And so last year alone, between the governor's January proposal of budget and his May revise, the cost of financing state government went down by $480 million. $480 million. That gave us the budgetary space to invest in education for our young folks. We had already committed to do a $2.1 billion increase in our K-12 funding, but this gave us the space to increase our UC funding by $125 million, our CSU funding by $125 million, and invest $300 million in our community colleges so that we help our young folks get the education and the training that they need to get the jobs of the future. So we help folks who are mid-career and have been displaced from industries that are shutting down go back to a community college and get new training and skills to find a job that will allow them to provide for their families. And it also allowed us to move forward on our plan to pass the middle-class scholarship that Ted spoke of, where we're reducing the cost at UC and CSU by 40% for families that earn up to $100,000 a year. Some additional savings for folks above that level, but 40% for those that make up to $100,000 a year. And that really means that we're giving folks a chance not to be saddled by the huge debt that otherwise would negatively impact them. This is really consistent with what I wanted to do when I got elected. I never wanted to be in a situation where we had to make massive cuts to the decisions that we made, but circumstances dictated that we take responsible action. On the same token, when we have revenues, we've got to be responsible as well and make long-term investments, create opportunities for people. And quite frankly, it's an extension of the work that I was engaged in for 15 years that I had the privilege to serve in the labor movement before I ran for office. I think that we need somebody in the controller's office, but in office in general, who will fight to protect the gains that we've made as a state, who believes that government has to work efficiently and effectively, and who's going to leverage the authority of the office to create the right kind of investments to create jobs for California's future. Now, it's especially true when you look at questions of pension security and the role that the controller has on the CalPERS and CalSTRS boards. We are at a critical moment as a state, and quite frankly as a nation, in the question of what we believe about pension security. And we are in a place where we've been fighting a defensive battle, where people have wanted us to walk away from defined benefit pensions and go to a defined contribution plan. And you saw that in the efforts of the previous governor. You saw that in the efforts of folks in San Jose and San Diego and city government. But you've even seen that in Governor Brown, who's wanted to walk away from a defined benefit plan and go to a hybrid plan that doesn't give folks the same level of pension security that we know a well-run defined benefit pension plan does. So I want to continue to fight to keep the promise of a defined benefit pension that people have worked for. It's the deal.